was going to say good morning, everybody. I hesitate to say good. I mean, you interpret it in whichever way you want to this morning, but thank you for those of you that made it here anyway with the weather as it is. So welcome to the Strategic and Technical Planning Committee, today the 21st of November 2022, and a special welcome also to those members of the public who are watching virtually. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Robin Cook, Chairman of the committee, and my Vice Chairman is Councillor John Worth.
Good morning.
The meeting is being live streamed and the recording will also be available to view on the website after the meeting. Can I remind everyone that when you're speaking, can you please speak directly into the microphones so that you can clearly be heard and seen? We've got 2 applications to determine today, and the case officer will be invited to present the report and the recommendations. I will then invite members of the public who have registered to speak to address the committee, and each speaker will have 3 minutes. The case officer will then have an opportunity to respond to issues raised by speakers should they wish, and then committee members will then be given the opportunity to ask questions of the case officer before moving on to their debate. Officers with us today include Mike Garrity, Head of Planning, Phil Crowther, our Solicitor, Anne Collins, who's the Development Manager, Area Manager, South West. Felicity Hart. Is Felicity here this morning? No. Trevor Badley, Lead Project Officer. Susie Coyne, Consultant. Hello, Susie. Penny Canning, Lead Project Officer. And Elaine Tibble, Senior Democratic Services Officer. And there is some other support from the Democratic Services. We've got David Northover with us today as well, and Josh as well. He's sat in on our meetings previously, so he's quite experienced. I think that covers everybody. I don't think I've missed anybody out, so thank you for that. Move on to item 1, apologies. Any apologies, please, Elaine?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Mary Penfold and Councillor David Took.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2 is to agree and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of November. Are you all happy that I sign those as a true record? All agreed for that? Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. If any members have got any declarations to make at this stage, please let us know. If not, if it happens, it comes up during the presentations or debate, then please make it known to us. Item 4, public participation. The detail is given in the agenda, but we do have speakers today, and they're welcome, in fact, to make their presentation either prior to the case officer's presentation, or wait until that's finished and then say their piece. Which would you prefer, please? To follow. Yes, I gather that's approval to follow the presentations. Thank you. Right, moving on to the agenda items proper. Item 5, this is an application number 6/2020/0321. It's Swanworth Quarry, Kingston Lane, Worth Matravers, Swanage, BH19 3LE. And it's the winning and working of limestone through the lateral extension to Swanworth Quarry, retention of processing plant and existing infrastructure, importation of inert waste material for restoration purposes, and continued production and sale of recycled aggregates. This is going to be introduced by Susie Coyne, and when you're ready, take your time, get your presentation up, and over to you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. This proposal is for an extension to the existing Swanworth Quarry and is a site allocation in the Bournemouth, Poole and Dorset Mineral Sites Plan 2019 for the supply of crushed rock. The extension covers approximately 14 hectares of land and will enable the release of 2.4 million tonnes of limestone, which would be worked at an approximate rate of 125,000 tonnes a year over a 20-year period. The existing quarry plant site will be used for processing and stockpiling the mineral and for continued aggregate recycling operations. The void space will be backfilled using quarry waste and imported waste materials, and final restoration of the site, including the existing quarry, would take a further 7 years to complete, so 27 years in total. As you can see from this slide, the site lies on the Isle of Purbeck. The closest settlement is Worth Matravers, about 400 metres to the south of the existing quarry. To note, a recent consultation response has been received from Worth Matravers Parish Council since publication of the committee report to say that they strongly support the proposal. The next nearest village is Kingston, which is to the northwest. It's about 600 metres to the northwest of the extension, so the new area of working.
Could I just interrupt for a moment, Susie? Sorry. If you could just bring the mic a little bit closer. I don't think it's my hearing. It's not coming over.
Off. Ah,
Is that okay now?
that's better. Sorry, I did press it, but it was not hard enough. So the next nearest settlement is Kingston, which is 600 metres to the northwest of the extension area. It's a new area of working, and Corfe Castle is about 2 kilometres to the north. The nearest residential properties to the extension area are on the B3069. The Kingston Barns, about 270 metres to the north, so on the way to Kingston, and Afflington Lookout Barn dwellings, about 350 metres to the east. The quarry entrance is located on Kingston Lane, to the east of the quarry, the existing quarry. The existing quarry on that slide is the one with a black dashed line. It's on Kingston Lane, which is the road that leads to Worth Matravers. Go on to the next one. This slide shows that the site is affected by many statutory and other significant designations. It's within the Dorset area of outstanding.
Apologies. Okay. Are you able to get a pointer up on the screen? Please, that would be helpful.
Do we have one?
No, you can do it
On the
you can do it
computer.
by your presentation.
So the green, all this green is the A and B. It's the blue line, this dashed blue line running along here is the limit of the Purbeck Heritage Coast, which is an area that's been awarded the European Diploma for Protected Areas. It's one of only 3 such areas in the UK, in England. It adjoins a special area of conservation, which is this, it's the red hatched area. So it's this area here, which is the Isle of Portland to Studland Cliffs and the South Dorset Coast SSSI. The Dorset and East Devon Coast World Heritage Site, the Jurassic Coast, lies just over 1 kilometre to the south. So it's this cross-hatched area along here, all along the coast. It coincides with the St Albans Head to Dilston Head SAC. The Dorset Ramsar site is up here with Corfe Common SSSI and the Dorset Heath SAC. There are scheduled monuments. These are the grey hatched areas. This is a Romano-British settlement or farm with the remains of. And these are other scheduled monuments here, a little further away. And there are 3 Bronze Age round barrows either side of the extension area, which are these 3 dots here. The proposed reinstatement of the extension area to original levels preserves the setting of these barrows that lie either side, and the way of working has been designed to safeguard that setting as well. The purple dots are all listed buildings on here. Oh, and finally, Sorry, this is the Encombe. It's a Grade 2 registered park and garden. It's the Encombe estate. How do we move on? That one. Okay. This slide shows the extent of the AONB, so here's the site, and this is the extent of the AONB. Does it coincide with other AONBs? I think this one is. Yeah, but anyway, you can see how extensive the AONB here is. Here's Swanage, Corfe Castle, Wareham. So the mineral travels up through Corfe Castle to reach the Poole and Bournemouth markets. The proposed site allocation was approved by the planning inspector in examining the minerals sites plan on the grounds that it would provide an important alternative source of crushed rock to supply this market, the Bournemouth and Poole market, in a sustainable manner and reduce miles travelled. So although lorries travel through Corfe Castle to supply the market, a proportion of the material produced is delivered locally within Purbeck, and in particular to Swanage. This local market is also the source of the inert waste materials that are imported for aggregate recycling and restoration purposes. As you are all no doubt aware, national policy is that major development in the AONB should only be granted in exceptional circumstances and in the public interest. It's considered that these circumstances do apply to the development proposal for the reasons outlined in the report, which includes a substantial financial contribution to fund local enhancement projects to appropriately offset the residual impacts. This aerial photograph shows the existing working area, which is here, the existing quarry, in relation to the proposed extension area, which is currently fields. This is the B3069 here, and these are the Afflington lookout barns there. Also I wanted to explain that the existing quarry and the extension area are on two sides of a steep coombe, and the Purbeck Way runs through that coombe. It runs actually from Afflington Lookout Barns down here and through the coombe. So that it's a very steep coombe. So they're on opposite valley sides, basically. Before reaching the coombe, the Purbeck Way runs along the eastern side of the extension area, as I pointed out there. And this top view that's the Purbeck Way. That's towards the start of it. And this, you can see that's the extent of, would be the extension area. So it would be visible from the Purbeck Way. And this is further along. Oops, pressing too hard. And that's, again, the extent of the extension area that would be seen. The coombe and the Purbeck Way have to be spanned in order to get across from the existing quarry into the extension area. And this slide shows a photo montage of how the bridge crossing might look. There would need to be an access cutting either side of the bridge so that vehicles travel below adjoining ground levels and visual impact is reduced.
Mr. Chairman, can I just interrupt? I'm watching this live and the pictures that are being broadcast live don't coincide.
Oh, no.
We've got here, and so it's quite, and so
Sorry.
we're talking to a different, is there anything we can do to just get that back in sync?
Sorry.
Yeah. It's probably a technical glitch. Maybe we've got the same picture here as on that screen.
And we're following.
Through. If you're watching on the Teams link directly, you should be seeing exactly the same. If you're watching on the live stream, there will be a delay. Thank you.
This slide shows the initial development of the quarry. This would be following the bridge construction, the first phase of the development, and it involves the access cutting, creating this access cutting to provide the haul road into the working area. Can't remember how many, I think it's about 240,000 tonnes of material were released from that access cutting. Strip soils and overburden will be used to provide shallow banks along the eastern boundary and the southern boundary. And surplus materials would be stockpiled in the main quarry. So this is the area that will be used for stockpiling surplus materials. And you'll see in later slides the imported restoration materials for later restoration of the site. Early on in this phase, a number of biodiversity measures would also be implemented. Southern dry stone wall and northern dry stone wall will be improved, and hedge and scrub would be planted alongside them. This is to provide additional back commuting corridors as compensation for some loss of areas. There'd be an amphibian and reptile conservation and relocator area established here, and there will be field ponds. These are for potential great crested newt habitat. The remainder of the working would occur in 3 phases, so 1, 2, 3. And it would work obviously from south to north. As much as possible, each of the phase would following extraction, be reinstated to original levels. So you can see this is the slide showing the final phase of 3 being worked. Phase 1 has been restored that much. Phase 2 has been restored that much. Well, with some further import of material in this area. But because the haul road has to remain in, they can't be fully restored. In the meantime, restoration materials would have been stockpiled here in the main quarry along with stripped overburden and soils. Then restoration would proceed from the north back through the south and back into the quarry, and then restoration of the remaining areas of the quarry to be restored. The aggregate recycling would continue here. Currently, it's permitted on the green line, dotted line, and it would continue just to be within the blue line, which is the plant site area and stockyard. The aggregate recycling operation, so the continued use of the plant and stockyard and the aggregate recycling and, sorry, I'm pointing at this, it's not very good, and the stockpiling of materials in this area means that this area shown in colour here, can't be restored as currently planned for 2025. This amounts to about 9.7 hectares in total. As you can see, it's the light green is calcareous grassland. These are ponds or ephemeral ponds. They won't always be wet. They're at the lowest point of the quarry. But the remainder of the quarry will be restored, or this is aimed to be restored in time. So this is 9.7 hectares of land. And these are the areas that have been proposed to compensate for this delay in restoration. So we have area 1, which is mostly to be calcareous grassland with some mixed scrub, neutral grassland, and some new ponds down here. Area 2 is an existing woodland and mixed scrub area that will be extended and would incorporate wetland features. It's already got some wetland features and they would be enhanced. Area 3 would be a mix of calcareous grassland and scrub with some woodland, and area 4 is an existing woodland that would be extended, I think, more this way and enhanced. So on all of these areas will be managed for a 30-year period. So once the permission is implemented, these areas will be created and managed then for a 30-year period. Finally, we have the restoration proposals for the quarry. The existing quarry would be restored as already approved, so it's this area here. And it would be mostly calcareous grassland at a lower level and ponds at the lowest points, plus areas of planting here and around the car park area. A length of the former face, of the work face, sorry, would be restored here to show the exposed Portland limestone formation. And there would be a series of new footpaths, a network, and some circular walks of varying difficulty. So these would be steeper ones here, and then you've got nice circular walks here and around the pond areas. Oh gosh, what have I done now? No, I was, yeah. The next one, that's it. Lovely. And these link into the Purbeck Way here and into adjoining, there's another footpath that runs down here. Is it Bridle Way? I can't remember. Anyway, public right of way. And so they link in. So these are the purple, did I say purple dotted line? In the extension area, this again would be mostly calcareous grassland and adjoining land. This land here is blue land in the ownership of the applicant and would also be restored to calcareous grassland. This is the only area that would go back to agricultural, so it could be any type of agriculture. And then these two ponds have been created earlier. This would be created. And this area will be grassland and there will be some areas of planting along here. And the dry stone wall that was previously along the middle of the site, separating the fields, but would have been taken out to allow the extraction to continue, would be reinstated. Again, all these areas would be managed for a 30-year period. And the footpaths would be available for at least the same period. Okay, thank you very much.
Are you summing up with the recommendation, please, Susie? That was, we were waiting for you to finish, basically, yes.
Put that back on. The recommendation is that the application is approved subject to the conditions at the end of the report and subject first to the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the financial contribution, the 30-year long-term management of the restored areas, availability of the new footpaths to be available for the public, for access by the general public for the 30-year period, and a board to administer the compensation fund. Or if planning permission is not completed within 6 months, for the application to be refused, but an extension of time may be agreed by the head of planning, just in order to try and ensure that the agreement is approved or completed in a timely fashion.
Okay, thank you. For clarity, can we have it put on the screen, please? Apologies for the delay, but I think as the recommendation is in two parts and there's quite a lot to it, I think it's important that members have clarity. I will repeat it anyway before we go to the vote, but I think if we can get it enlarged on the screen, it would be helpful. Please. I think that's fine. Members are happy with that, I think. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. I've got three public speakers on this and the ward member. So the first speaker is Martin Rowell. Martin, when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. The following questions and comments were gathered after discussion with Kingston residents. We asked the committee to consider the following in reaching their decision regarding this application. We wish to point out that we have no personal dispute with the applicant Suttles. We appreciate they operate a professional and commercial business and are engaged with the local community. Our questions and comments are directed towards the effect that the application has on our AONB and the local residents adversely affected should this be approved. The original application is based on the premise that it offers local employment and it is in the Dorset Minerals Plan. Yet Dorset Council's own figures state that there are, in total, 200 jobs in Purbeck relating to mining and quarrying. The current national and local labour market post-Brexit shows a huge shortage of skilled workers and hundreds of unfilled job vacancies. Surely anyone losing their job would very swiftly find an alternative employment. Without this extension, the existing quarry would cease production and the vast hole in the AONB would be remediated now. Should the new proposal be approved, not only would there be another gigantic hole carved in our AONB, but the existing hole would not be restored for another 25 years. This is a long-term development and should be assessed as such. The number of lorries we expected to stop running up and down Kingston Hill and through Corfe Castle is 150 a day, 75 each way down a steep winding hill with no footpath. This is equivalent to 1 every 4 minutes between 6:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. For this to continue for another 25 years would be an extraordinary prospect for the committee to support, given the environmental and safety issues. We should be doing better, not maintaining a very poor status quo. Aggregate is not the same as quarrying of Purbeck stone, and aggregate is available from less environmentally damaging locations, with significantly fewer lorry journeys through Kingston and Corfe. What is unique and traditional and connected to significant employment is the AONB. Latest environmental reports recently submitted by the applicant are misleading and unduly minimise the visual impact. The quarry extension is on an upslope field very close to the main road. This is an excavation that will be clearly seen from the road and the adjacent dwellings. No amount of earth bund will hide this new scarring of AONB landscape. We attached a photograph of that. Suttle quarries have an annual turnover in the region of a region of 7 million per annum. The Suttles offer of 13,000 per annum for an environmental fund. Less than 0.2% is hopelessly inadequate. If approved, it is essential Dorset Council puts in place a duty of care management plan, including representation for local residents, where mitigation and impacts.
Could you sum up, please? You've just got 10 seconds left. Thank you very much. Thank you. Our next speaker is Lauren Davis, and she, I understand, works for Suttles. When you're ready, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I've worked for the company for 7.5 years, but it's actually more of a personal thing for me. So my family in itself has worked at the quarry for 100 solid years now, me being the 4th generation. My grandparents, great-grandparents, everyone, my whole household works at the quarry. People in the Purbex do heavily rely on quarry work as a full-time, stable job, because most jobs are either seasonal, weather-dependent or workload-dependent, whereas the quarry does provide a stable all-year-round work. Local suppliers also heavily rely on the resources to be competitive and to be able to financially be able to, sorry, lost my train of thought, be able to financially be able to offer to do jobs that are within people's budgets, and having the quarry will minimise having to transport stone from further afield, i.e. like the Mendips and Portland, which will reduce to some degree the amount of lorries transporting on roads because you haven't got them doing that massive journey. So yeah, I'm all for it. So that's it.
Well within time, thank you very much. The next speaker is John Suttle, who's a director of the applicant company. Again, 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to address you today. I'm John Suttle, Operations Director for Suttle Stone Quarries. I feel it's important that I speak on behalf of our company today because I'm one of the Suttle family members that has led on this application. As a family, we live in the same area in which we quarry and in which the application is being made. We're a local family business in the sense that we have been quarrying on the Isle of Purbeck for generations, but also that we have provided good jobs to generations of other Purbeck families and continue to do so. We're acutely aware of the collective responsibility we have as custodians of the special landscape that we operate and live in. Our quarrying business employs 50 people, more than 90% of which live on the Isle of Purbeck. The Swanmouth extension is vital in securing our business and jobs for over 25 years. Swanmouth itself has been quarried for over 100 years. Recently, it has provided around 50% of Dorset's crushed limestone supply to the main markets of Poole, Bournemouth and Purbeck. Swanmouth is the closest source of construction aggregate limestone to those vital markets, and alternative sources, being further away, require more road miles, fuel consumption, and therefore generate significantly more carbon emissions in delivering to this main Dorset market. Our business also supports a local supply chain. Our expenditure on purchases, energy, taxes, business rates and wages amounts to more than £7 million annually. The extension is the only crushed limestone site allocated in the Dorset Minerals Sites Plan adopted in 2019, having satisfied the NPPF exceptional circumstances tests in the eyes of Planning Inspector Elizabeth Ord. There is no quarry providing crushed limestone or sea defence stone further east on the south coast, and as such, our nimble business has also been crucial in providing emergency sea defence stone to vital local and national infrastructure. We've worked tirelessly with the design of the quarry extension to ensure that environmental impacts are minimised and restoration enhancements maximised. The Council's internal specialists and consultees have confirmed that development would not result in unacceptable impacts on the environment or local amenity, apart from some residual landscape and visual impacts. In this regard, as required by the Mineral Sites Plan, Suttles are to provide significant funding for compensatory environmental enhancements locally, whilst the quarry remains operational. This money will be able to provide significant local improvements to amenity and accessibility in the parishes of Corfe, Castle.
Could you sum up, please?
Sorry, Ma'am. The restoration proposals would also result in the creation of valuable wildlife habitats covering an area of around 150 acres in the extension area, existing quarry and adjacent land, all of which would be managed for 30 years to increase and secure biodiversity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And our last speaker is Ward Member, Councillor Cherry Brooks. Sherry, you've got 3 minutes as well when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be quick. I've done 5 bullet points. So, and my phone's gone off. This site is part of Dorset Council's Mineral Sites Plan. It recognises the contribution that the quarry makes to our economy in Dorset. The quarry was there long before the villages. They grew to accommodate workers in quarrying over the years. Suttles are a responsible organisation who've already worked hard with environmentalists to reinstate the previous phase to a high ecological standard. There's no reason to suppose that that won't happen again. Natural England are satisfied, which you've read in the officer's report. There are no big environmental barriers. And remember, this is temporary and it will be reinstated. The company is currently working on depleting reserves as this application has taken so long to get here. If not approved, there will be a loss of jobs. Currently, there are 110 in the company, 50 in the quarrying side. 30, which is more than half of that, will lose their jobs. That's 30 families in Purbeck who are at risk as we're expecting a very hard winter and cost of living crisis. Remember, this is temporary. It will be reinstated on completion and it will continue to provide secure employment in Purbeck. Therefore, I support the application. Thank you.
Fine, thank you very much indeed. Do the officers want to respond to anything that's been said from the speakers, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond on a couple of points. It's not the case it's 150 lorries. I think that comes from a doubling of the 75 a day average. In fact, that's 75 movements, so it's 37 and a half or 37 and 38 in and then out again. The actual, the condition specifies now 96 movements per day maximum, which if you work out the final, the existing condition on the quarry is quite complicated and actually probably quite difficult to enforce, and there have been conflicts between, it has internal conflicts, so it's been simplified in the committee report. And the final maximum total is 13,200 lorries per year, movements per year. But if you divide that by the number of working days a year, it arrives at 96 per day, which is why it's been simplified just to be 96. But that would be 48 in and 48 out. And that, again, is specified in the condition, to be absolutely clear. I think it does arrive this point of confusion between what movements mean and trips. And trips is the half, and the movements are two movements, one in, one out. So I just want to make that clear. And on the funding, the original, I wasn't quite clear what amount was being referred to, but the funding has increased from the original offer, and it is now very close to the assessed need that came out of the compensation paper for what was actually required to compensate for the impacts. So it is an increased offer. That was what I wanted to say. And close to the assessed need, very close to it. That was all I really wanted to say. Oh, sorry, there was one other point, and it was about only allowing phase one to proceed, and then the other phases, and once that's finished, then allowing the others. But as you've seen, the way the quarry works is just not possible to do. But that has been addressed by one of the conditions, which requires surveying of the previous, once you get to phase two, of the previous phases to see how far restoration has progressed. And if it hasn't progressed enough, then the council has the potential to reduce the maximum amount of extraction, the maximum depth of extraction, so ensure that the quarry will be reinstated to original levels so that the harm to the AONB will be fully addressed at the end of the development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mike Garrity.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to pick up a couple of points because there was an issue made about the suitability or otherwise of the location. I think just for members' benefit, it's worth bearing in mind that minerals have to be worked where they exist because you don't have alternative choices in the same way that you do necessarily with other locations. So there is also automatically a degree of having to have regard to that. the start. I know there has been some discussion about the need for jobs and the importance to the economy, which is materially relevant to the application, but it's also worth bearing in mind that the starting point of this is whether or not the plan complies with the adopted local plan. Policy MS3 does make it very clear that the extension, as identified, is allocated to contribute to the adequate and steady supply of crushed rock, so that the local plan has considered that particular issue, and the matter of principle of whether or not that should continue has been addressed. So therefore, this application is looking at the detail of the scheme that's come forward in accordance with the adopted plan. I just wanted to make that point clear. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a good point to make. Thank you. Right, I'm going to move now to members. Members' questions first. If I just go round, just as I see you there, and if you've got a question relating really to the presentation initially, and then after the questions we'll go into debate. So, Councillor Brenton.
Can I do it? Hi, thanks. Can I ask the officer, I was sort of scrolling between the teams and back to this. Is there a slide showing the view from the B Road going down to Worth? Because in my memory, driving past, which I do quite regularly, you do not get any view of what's, because of the levels, you don't see down into the quarry. Are there any sight line photographs from either up by Kingston Barnes or near the entrance?
Sorry? If you can respond to that, yes, if you have got some pictures or what was the situation, please.
There isn't in the slide because and there are views, you're right, you will be able to see it. And there are quite a lot of views where you'll be able to see it. And that's explained in the report. I think it's something like 6 of the viewpoints in the LVIA will have a substantial impact. It will be clearly visible whilst it's being worked. It won't be the whole quarry, you'll see parts of it and then it will be restored. So the higher levels will be restored. So at times you will see it, some views will be worse than others. But that has been taken into account in all of this.
Why is it?
You want to come back on that?
Site visits for many other visual things now. I think it might be reassuring if we did a site visit on this, so I would propose a site visit. I know I'll probably get shot down, but I think it's hard to picture, if you don't know the area, it's hard to picture the topography. The current quarry is barely visible. I wonder about this one, but I just would like a site visit for other councillors, the members of the committee, to be aware of the situation. Thank you.
I'm taking that as a proposal at the moment, but what I'm going to do is hold that and go around and find out if there's any more questions, I think, from members, if I may. So I was going to go around in order. I'll get to you, Shane, in a moment. Okay, so Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, could the case officer give a bit more detail about the importance of and the need for this crushed rock?
Would you like to respond?
This material is a routine building material, so it's used in all housing sites, in road construction. When I say basic, it's an essential building material. It needs to, and a certain amount of it is needed for this area, and currently Swanworth provides half of that need. So if Swanworth doesn't continue, there will be a hole in the market, and that material will have to come from further away. And it's doubtful that the Portland quarries can double their production and provide it. And if you were bringing it from further away, that's a higher quality aggregate that shouldn't really be used for the sort of fill construction fill jobs that this will go on, the material will go on. I mean, Swanworth does provide a range of products. It also does produce some dimension stone where good seams are found of the material. And as John Suttle has explained, it's produced rock armour. It also produces agricultural lime, which I gather is becoming quite scarce across the UK. So there's a variety of materials that it produces. But it's an aggregate, essentially. So a fill, construction fill.
Okay, thank you. Mike Garrity.
Yeah, just to add to what the officer has said about the need for this, that's actually quite an important question, because it went to the heart of what the local plan had to consider when the site was tested through the local plan examination. So in considering the impact on the AONB, which it was acknowledged that there would be an impact, it was considered at the time that there needed to be a sufficient justification to be able to meet the exceptional test for bringing a site forward in that location. During the examination process, that was tested out through the hearing sessions, and the inspector was convinced by the arguments that actually the need for the crushed rock in this location was quite substantial, and the alternatives of bringing it in from elsewhere would cause other problems in terms of distances travelled to market and the like. So effectively, the principle became an established part of the allocation in the local plan. So from that point of view, I suppose as a word of reassurance to members, that issue is not before you in the sense that you have to consider that because the local plan has actually been through that process and was tested through the examination. So whilst it's an important question to ask, I think the starting point is the local plan that has gone through that process, has identified the fact that there is a need, and therefore that was seen as a justification, which is why the site came forward in the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you. As ever, a detailed explanation, so thank you for that, Mike. Councillor Dyer.
Questions at present, Chairman.
Councillor Bolwell.
No questions at present, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Dunseith.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered if you could give a little more detail on the proposed bridge. We did see a picture of what it might look like, and I gather there are some objections to it. So I just wondered if you could go back to the bridge, please. Thank you.
So the bridge would be constructed on concrete supports. I can't remember the actual term of those, either end. And then it would be a concrete span across. And that would be used for dump trucks delivering the material from the extension area back to the processing plant. So it would be about, I think it's 5 metres above the Purbeck Way. And it's low enough so won't be seen. It will be seen obviously from walkers on the Purbeck Way, but it won't be seen elsewhere because it's low enough. And the reason for the cutting is so that the lorries can go across at a lower level, so that reduces any impact of those being seen from wider views. There was a debate as to whether it should be close-boarded, but we felt in the long run it'd be better if it was close-boarded, because that would reduce the noise. Because as you walk through, there will be an impact, but it's a transitory impact. It's not like it's your house that's being affected at that level for a long time. Your experiences as you walk through. And of course, there might not be lorries using it at the time you walk through, so they won't always be going across, not every day of the year. But it is a industrial structure. It's a bridge across the Purbeck Way. It would take about 6 months to put in as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rideout.
Chairman, Councillor Rideout, Gillingham Ward. Can I just ask a couple of questions of Susie? First of all, I'd just like to say what fantastic report. It was very, very detailed, and I had to really concentrate on it. Just a couple of items of clarification, though. If this goes through today and is approved, when would the work start on the new extension? I'm talking with relevance to HGV numbers. I know you said 96 in total. So would the existing quarry still be going alongside the new extension? Just clarification on that. And also there was talk in the report and a bit of slight controversial over the bunds. Eventually, when the site is restored, I take it those bunds will be removed. They'll be all part of the restoration. Just for clarification, please.
There's quite a bit in there, so you can respond to that in any order you like. Okay.
So the works, so first of all, we have to have the Section 106 agreement signed, completed and signed. Also, there's the Encombe estate works that need to be done before works can commence. I understand if permission is granted, the applicant is aiming to do those in the spring when the weather's obviously better. So I would imagine towards the end of next year, maybe earlier the following year, that they would actually start work on the bridge. Maybe sooner, you know, and then, of course, they won't start extraction until the bridge is completed, and that's going to take 6 months. In terms of HGV movements, they are continuing because they're continuing in connection with the existing quarry. I think they have run out of stone, but they may have some still stockpiled, but they haven't. I think they've extracted all they need. So they really need actually to be moving on with this to maintain the supply and have this approved. But they are still, of course, bringing in waste materials for recycling and for restoration of the existing quarry. The bunds would be removed. They are topsoil and subsoil, so they would be used in final restoration of the site. And there are some bunds on the, can we get the slide up, actually? It was which area was it? Get confused with the areas. One of the areas that's on the eastern side of the quarry that's proposed to be calcareous grassland. There are some bunds on that side, existing bunds, and they're going to be removed. So it's this area here. You can see them on that, actually. Yeah, I can see them. Yeah, so they're along here, these bunds here. They're going to be put back into the quarry on restoration. Well, actually, those are being removed immediately, sorry. They would have been used in restoration of the existing quarry, but those are going to be used now. I guess they'll be stockpiled and used then in the extension area, because that area is going to be made into calcareous grassland.
Is that the answer you needed? Thank you. Councillor Bartlett, apologies for keeping you waiting.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got about 8 questions for the debate section, okay? But just for the questions I want to ask now about the presentation. And I'm surprised we didn't have a site visit as well, being such a complex application that's in front of us with significant issues around the surrounding countryside and the OMB. And if we're not going to do a site visits, then I'm wondering why we're not embracing technology of drone footage and using drones. Because I think for members, I don't want to put words in my colleagues' mouths, but I've done quite a few of these now, and this is quite a difficult and complicated one to ascertain. So it's a bit disappointing we didn't do the site visit, or we haven't embraced drone technology. As I say, I've got 8 questions during the debate, Chairman.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Jesperson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say I'm in some sympathy with the point about the site visit, but I mean I'm not sure there's enough cause to delay now and have a site visit, but nonetheless, for future reference, I think it might have been helpful, or as Councillor Bartlett said, some slightly better photographs so that we could have a better, some slightly more photographs. I don't think the photographs we've got are excellent, but more photographs of views. However, my question is specifically about the HGV numbers. I was listening, but can you tell me again the the number of HGVs that currently come in and out of the quarry, and how much this will change with the new arrangements if we give permission for this.
They would not change. They're a continuation of HGV movements. They're the same level of movements that would continue as currently. No increase. No, it's continuation.
Yes, that's how I read it in the report. It would retain the same number of lorry movements. Yeah. I picked that up in the report as well as from the presentation here. Okay. The end of members' questions. Now, we've got a proposal at the moment for a site visit. Now, site visit is always a difficult one because it's not standard policy to have site visits, otherwise we'd probably have no time to do the committee meetings. And it really got to be extreme circumstances. And I think we've got a proposal. Can I go back to the proposal and say, have you got reasons? Can you give us specific reasons why you're proposing a site visit, please?
I would say I'm proposing a site visit because the views from, I mean, we've had the picture, the only picture we've had on site has been of the Purbeck Way and the possible bridge. But the impact on life in that area would be much more affected by the views from the roads. And I mean, at the moment, because of the topography, you don't see it. I would like to be able to judge whether or not the drop in topography will save it from being a scar on the landscape. And if we'd had sort of more pictures from the side, the long views, I think that it would have been much more helpful. But as we didn't, I would propose a site visit.
Okay, we've got a seconder for that, please. Yeah, Mike, before I go to the seconder, Mike Garrity.
I just thought it might be worth me just commenting on that request because I think it touches on something that goes probably to the heart of whether or not it's acceptable in principle. And I think that the allocation was made on the basis of those landscape impacts being acknowledged. And the package of measures that are designed within the compensation package are designed effectively to mitigate and deal with some of those impacts and compensate for them as well. So I don't think there's any question that there is an impact. Therefore, going on a site visit to see that there is an impact would actually leave you in quite a difficult position because I'm not sure that you could go to the heart of the permission in terms of the principle of it. So that was why a site visit hasn't been proposed for this one, simply because it is an allocated site and one that's already gone through that process. So that's just an observation. But I think if you were minded to, as a committee, to go on a site visit, I think you'd want to be very clear about the scope of what you're trying to look at as far as the site visit is concerned, just so that we're clear about what we're looking for and what officers would be actually trying to point out on that site visit. Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you. Yes, you're right, because this is why I set great store on having the recommendation up there, because there are some quite detailed conditions. I'm just trying to bring it back up on my screen again. I've lost it. But there are a number of conditions there which do mitigate the sort of impact that I believe is being raised here. And I think that has been tackled. And as the head of planning said, the site has already been identified and it's in the local plan as a site that's suitable. I do accept a degree of perhaps a little more clarity in terms of photographs for some of these sites, and I don't think we make it.
And apologies for this, Chairman, but a suggestion that you might want to consider, we could quite, if you're happy to bear with us for a couple of minutes, we could load up some images from the submitted information from the Landscape and Visual Impact Assessment, if members would find that helpful. and that would just show some of the viewpoints and routes around, which might actually just give a bit of a visual impression of the location. So I'll leave that with you, but that's a suggestion. If you're happy for us to do that, then we're quite prepared to just sort out that, and it'll take us just a couple of minutes to load it up onto the screen.
Okay, I'll go back to propose. Are you happy if we do that?
Yes,
We get some more photographs up. If I adjourn the meeting for a short time, how long, 10 minutes?
It'll only take a couple of minutes, Chairman, so yeah, it's 5 minutes at most.
Okay, we'll adjourn for 5 minutes and we'll reconvene at 11:09 then. Thank you. Do you run us through the photographs? You've got some additional pictures, I see, so if you'd like to run through them for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is viewpoint 1. This is taken from the B3609. Yeah, you can see the 1 and 2, and they're showing the direction of the view. Sorry, I should use the cursor. These show the direction of the view. So that's 1 and 2.
Just for...
Yeah. So back to back to view 1. So that's, let's see if I can get that a bit bigger. So that's opposite Kingston Barnes, and you can see the extent of the extension area there. I think arguably from there it's not that visible. From here, though, this is viewpoint 2, which is the lay-by on the B3609, and you can see the extent. I think you would be able to see it there. But you have to remember you wouldn't be able to see all of it at all of the time, because it will be, the higher land will always be restored. The Hall Road is going on the eastern side of it, and it's lower down. So you would see top faces, and then those would be restored as the site progresses. So it's not like a hole in the ground for a long time. It's parts of the working you'll be able to see. These are ones you've already seen in the presentation. These are the Purbeck Way. That's just another one of the Purbeck Way. There are 3 in there. I think and I did put that one in. It's the next one that, again, you would get a good view. There will be a screen bank in front of that, which will mitigate it to some extent, and you will see it. But what I think it's clear there will be an impact. But the point is that compensation fund has been offered to offset that, so the policy, it meets the policy requirement fully in that respect. This is from the road to Worth Matravers, viewpoint 6. Sorry, what have I done there? How do I get rid of that? I'll just click on that. That's all right. And you would only see a very small extent there, and that's quite a long distance view. You can see the existing quarry in the foreground here. And this is from, again, from Kingston Lane, and that's the extent, again, quite a long distance view. This is from the car park at Worth Matravers, and that's the extent of the quarry you could be able to see. And again, this is, we can show, that's it. So these are viewpoints 9 and 8 from Worth Matravers. So it's quite a long distance view. So you go back down, and again, you see the quarry, the existing quarry in the foreground. And this is viewpoint 10, and this is some distance away, Do you want to do it so I don't get it wrong? And then viewpoint 11 is from further along the B3609. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'm doing with your laptop.
It's difficult when you have to...
There it is. Oh, well done. Well done.
Sorry, you have to start again.
Oh, no, that's the presentation. Yeah.
It is, right.
How did I do that?
So we are here.
Okay.
I'll shrink us back down.
Yeah. So viewpoint 10 was the one from further to the west of Worth Travers. There's the extension area there. Existing quarries here. And this one is from viewpoint 11, and you would get a view, and that is quite open countryside. But again, it's a fairly long distance view. So that's the location further along the B3609. And is there a final? That's a very long distance view, and this is the extent of the application area. So you'd have to be really looking for it in those views. It wouldn't be immediately obvious, but I think you probably would see it in the closer views from the B3609. But as I said, it would be sections of the quarry. You'd never see the whole thing at any one time. Does that help? Is that enough?
Well, that's, if I say, an improvement on the first selection, so thank you very much for that. Go back to the proposer. Are you happier now you've seen these additional photographs, Councillor Brenton?
I'm not deliriously happy, but I understand, the problem is not so much it would be lovely to have had these pictures available to us in advance. Then I think I would have been less argumentative about it, thank you. But I will withdraw my proposal for a site visit.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry, Chair. I think your microphone is off.
Thank you. Yep. Technology is fighting back this morning, I think. But the recommendation, I'll just clarify it for members again, that the committee be minded to grant planning permission with the conditions that are below. This is in section 15 on page 77 of the report. Subject to the completion first of a section 106 agreement to secure the following obligations. There's then a list of highlighted obligations. Followed on from that list is or refuse planning permission if the agreement is not completed by the 21st of April 2023 or such extended time as agreed by the head of planning. And amongst that list, which I'm no doubt you've seen anyway, there's a lot of the mitigation in there that we've discussed earlier on during the presentation. So having made that point, who wants to kick off? Everybody's stunned into silence here. Yeah. This must be a first.
Shame.
Councillor Bartlett, I knew you'd come in with something. You said you had 8 questions earlier on. I wonder what happened to those.
I dare say all the other members groaned, Chairman. Okay. You have to bear with me as, I really don't enjoy the second version of modern.gov, so I've had to do it all hard copy. My questions. So the okay, so the first one in terms of the report we've got in front of us, there was several concerns on page 24-25 at 7.11. Natural England objected and raised concerns over the adverse effects on the biodiversity, bats and nesting birds and the such like. And the DC Natural Environment team also raised concerns over that. Could I just ask, as those various, is there a proposal actually to get those proper reports now in place? At this point, actually within the report, it says that they've been inadequate.
Who would like to respond to that one? Susie.
So they were originally inadequate, and we asked for further reports to be done, which explains the reason for the delay in the application coming to committee, because it was originally submitted over 2 years ago, and it's taken that long to do the further surveys because it needed we needed to have bat surveys in the autumn. We'd missed the autumn, so it went on another year. So those reports are all in. And there have been extensive negotiations to secure biodiversity net gain, a significant amount of biodiversity net gain through the application. And there's it does say in the report underneath the consultation responses that the NET Natural Environment team have said they're perfectly satisfied with what's now been submitted and the package of proposed measures. We have. Natural England haven't actually formally responded. We have tried to chase them up, and they have verbally agreed that they find everything acceptable now, including the compensation funding. So they've withdrawn but they haven't actually written to us to say that, but they have told officers that that's the case. So they're happy with it. So in answer to your question, all the surveys have been done. Satisfactorily. There will be biodiversity net gain, and there is no objection from either of those consultees.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Chairman. Could I come back with another one, unless you've got another speaker? Okay.
Your mic.
Page 43, 10.42, the last line. There would be significant landscape and visual effects. And I'm just wondering, within the report, do you mean harm? I'm not sure of that wording or that phrasing we've had before. When we talk about AONB, we talk about substantial harm or less than substantial harm. I was a little bit confused by the word effects.
Would you like to respond?
Terminology that's used, because this is environmental impact assessment, so we're assessing the effects of, but it's significant. Perhaps it should have been adverse effects, but it is harm. It's used interchangeably with harm. But those have been addressed through the compensation funding.
Yes, come back on that.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. As I say, it did confuse me a little bit because normally we talk about substantial harm or less than substantial harm, and I think it was the first time I'd seen effects within a report like that. If we go to the front-loaded contributions on page 49 at 10.69 of £150,000, and then year on.
Susie, can you turn your mic off, please?
Oh, on or off?
Okay, so if I start again. At page 49, 10.69, we talk about front-loaded contribution of £150,000, and then going on year, it's a further £7,000 per annum, and this is to help with improvements to the environment and recreational improvements for the local communities. It seemed to me that wasn't a great deal of money, and I'm just wondering how the officers come to derive at that sum of money. I'm not sure what the profit margins are with the quarry, but I know that putting that type of infrastructure in, when I've sat on these various things before, that money isn't a great deal of money to actually make the sort of improvements we're talking about. So I just wondered how officers arrived at agreeing that sum of money. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, it's 150 up front and then 7,000 per year during the life of the working, index linked. So that's how I read it over that period. So that would be 7,000 over 20 a year over 20 years, index link. 27 years, yes. Of course, there's the making good time, plus the 150,000. That's the figure.
I think, Chairman, what I'm asking is, we're constrained by that, are we? There's no wriggle room for manoeuvre on that.
I'll defer to the officer for that.
So it was an assessed need. So rather than pluck a figure out the air, what happened was that the Dorset AONB team did some ground truthing of what was necessary within the area. They defined an area that was affected by the proposals, and they came up with a calculation, a formula, methodology of working out what was needed, and then how much that would cost to implement it. And that came out at just over 400,000 in total. So obviously the applicants had offered 250,000 at that time, so we had further negotiations with them. They had some criticisms of the way the paper had been put together, and we agreed at this sum, which it is about 340,000 it works out at in total. So we weren't far off really what the compensation paper had said is the assessed need to compensate for this site. So we tried to do it on quite a scientific basis. We didn't just pluck a figure out of the air. So.
Okay, Shane.
Do you want to come back again?
Carry on. The list is getting shorter.
In terms of that monies, that ongoing process with those monies, and Dorset Council, as I understand it from the report, will be the ones that will be allocating where that spend is, and there's going to be a committee set up to overlook that. I'm just wondering what the ongoing scrutiny of that process would be. Have officers given any thought to that? I noticed that parish and councils can be a consultee on it, but they're probably not actually going to be on that committee because they may well be the ones that will be actually bidding for those monies and to be spent within their parishes in the future.
Is there any officer wants to respond to that one? How would it be managed within scrutiny within Dorset Council?
So the panel would be set up to, so they would receive the applications for funding, and the panel would look at those, would have had a look at them, and then they would discuss them as a committee and decide whether they would like them or not. And then they would make a recommendation to the council as to whether they thought they should release the funds for the project. So it's the council that makes the final decision as to whether the project goes ahead or not. The panel only makes that recommendation, so they look at it in the detail and then recommend to the council. So the council has the overall say, so the council will scrutinise how that money is. They will be responsible for the money as well.
Okay, and I think Mike Carrott is going to put a bit more flavour on that from within the council point of view.
Yeah, I was actually going to just draw members' attention to an existing example we have of a similar principle, I suppose, at the Witch Farm Landscape Fund, where it's landscape and ecology, where a sum of money for the Witch Farm scheme was put aside by the applicant, and a process was set up whereby there was a officer panel that looked at the technicalities of whether or not the actual project that comes forward is actually addressing the purpose for which the money is being provided. So it has to actually address those landscape issues, whatever it might be. They consider that, and various bodies would then bid for that fund if necessary, depending on how it would work. Then it comes before, usually to myself and the portfolio holder to agree that particular allocation as and when it comes forward. So the mechanism might vary a little bit depending on the scheme and what's appropriate, but the principle of it is that we retain scrutiny as a council, that it's based on a technical assessment as to whether or not that work is actually addressing the particular need for which the fund is set up. So that, and obviously it goes without saying, but I will say it anyway, that it is ring fenced to that very purpose and tied up with the Section 106. So it can't be used for something that's totally irrelevant. So it retains the integrity of the purpose of that fund so that it is actually addressing the landscape impacts.
Yeah, so there is a model in place which historically has been working for some time and obviously seems to work quite well. I haven't heard within this authority of any particular issues raised from that one, and that model obviously is where we'll be going in the future with this. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that was extremely beneficial, and it was good to hear, yeah, that we've got a past history in working with those types of arrangements. Thank you. Can I ask another one? Yep. So I need to be educated here yet again. Page 17 at 5.1, It talks about gabion stone and rock armour. And it goes on again at page 38 at 10.22/4. And I'm guessing the rock armour is coastal erosion, but I could be completely wrong about that the rock is used for coastal erosion protection, and gabion stone. So it's both those. Could I have some sort of clarity on what both those are? Because I don't really know. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that one, Susie?
I think I know the answer. I'm not absolutely certain, but I think rock armour is basically the really big stones that, it's used for coastal erosion. And then gabion stone is the ones you see within metal mesh, alongside roads, can be used alongside roads and can also be used in other defences or in landscaping, that sort of thing.
Any more?
If you've got another speaker, I can keep going, Chairman.
Must be nearing the end now, and I think you'll have to put your mic on every time I put mine on yours.
I do apologise. The next one is, in terms of the report, it talks about Dorset AONB team have got concern about the European diploma for protected areas. There's only 3 areas that exist in England, and potential of risk of this application impacting on that European diploma of protected areas. I just wondered whether we have any assurance from the officers that that actually won't happen. It's a bit like when we actually do anything around the Jurassic Coast with UNESCO, getting a bit twitchy about possibly withdrawing the World Heritage Site on our Jurassic Coast. I think it would be beneficial to me to have an assurance that we're not in risk of losing those types of areas that have been credited. Thank you.
Can we get some sort of assurance?
Yeah, sure. So there are obviously conditions on the diploma, and one of them is that it doesn't prevent quarrying happening within the site, but what it says is that it should not harm. I can't remember the exact wording. I thought I had it in there. I'm so sorry, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't harm it, or it should be addressed in some form. It should be compensated for. So that's happening through the compensation fund. Should be moderated, mitigated, and that's happening through the compensation fund. So I think it's unlikely that it will be withheld. The AONB team are satisfied as well with the level of funding, because it's on a par with other similar models elsewhere, like the Witch Farm Fund and so on.
Do I assume it from that, Chairman, that also because the fact it's within our local plan, that gives it some sort of assurity as well that we wouldn't actually lose that status? Is that's taken into consideration as well, is it?
Might be one for Mike to respond to, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to go back a bit in time, but during the examination, obviously the implications for landscape and all of the designations that exist in that area would have been considered as part of that process. So the local plan, insofar as it sets out the criteria, what it does is it sets out development criteria that have to be considered, which would have been developed on the basis of the evidence that supported the allocation in the plan. So therefore, there were a whole host of different considerations specifically to address things like landscape impact. That would have been informed by consultation responses from the AONB team to do with issues, existing designations. And there is a distinction between the heritage coast and the World Heritage Site, because although there is quite a significant overlap, they do serve slightly different purposes and quite significant differences, and also the extent of the areas are different. So from that point of view, all of that would have informed the development of the plan. That would have been part of the evidence base and would have been factored into whatever the development considerations were that were put into the local plan. This application has sought to address all of those considerations, and that's what the Landscape Fund is doing in terms of trying to manage those adverse impacts, both in terms of mitigating but also compensating for some of the others. So I suppose a short answer is, insofar as we can be sure, it's been a fairly comprehensive approach from the start of the policy formulation through to the application and the consideration of that, and that's probably all we can say at this stage. So we see no reason why there is a particular threat or risk to that, and that hasn't been drawn to our attention as part of this application, that it is something that we would have a concern about.
Thank you. Final one? You relieved?
Yeah, carry on if it's the final one.
throw that out the window in a minute. We get into the issues around groundwater and risk assessment. And obviously there's, I mean, for going back to my schoolboy days and doing geology, I think limestone's a semi-permeable stone that dissolves in water. So obviously, in terms of rainfall, water is going to leach down through that. Now, with the consideration that it's going to be effectively used as landfill at a later date, although it says that it's going to be inert waste, I'm just wondering about the local water table and the safeguarding the extraction from the springs. There was an issue about the ones at Hillbottom for Encombe Estate in Kingston, and using other abstraction sites to give drinking water. So just wonder what considerations are there around the risk that's proposed to the local water table and pollutant and contaminants?
Well, there is quite a bit of detail about that in the report, but is there anything you want to add to what's not in the report, for example?
No, not really. I think it is in there, but the point is that those supplies, water supplies, will be removed from potable use, so from drinking water use. They will still remain as sources of water supply, but they'll be used for amenity purposes to top up the lake at Encombe. And there will be a liner. There will be an impermeable or highly not entirely impermeable, but a barrier, a geological barrier below the landfill. So that protects against any rogue loads coming in. There will also be waste acceptance criteria on the material, so that will be routinely tested. So there are some very robust controls on the way that the restoration materials are allowed to go into quarries. And that is, I would as well add, that's really a matter for the Environment Agency to address.
Do you want to come back on that, Shane?
Yeah, please. The reason I asked the question was that about that, the testing of it in the future. So obviously, if there was any contaminant, it would get into the local water table. I didn't see it in the conditions. Is it set as a condition? I didn't see it as an extremely lengthy report, and as obviously I've gone through it quite a bit. But I didn't see it as a condition, an ongoing condition that water quality would be checked, either 6 monthly or year on yearly. Is that actually a condition? If it's not, can we set that condition?
Not certain whether it could be conditioned. It might be an informative note, possibly, but I'm not sure whether we could condition that. Anybody want to give us the technical update on that?
Yeah, again, yes, thank you, Chairman. I think because it's an Environment Agency matter, we're not actually intended to duplicate other processes that are in place or legislation. So because they have to comply with those, it's not something that we would put. We can put informatives on planning applications, on permissions. There's no harm in doing that, and that might be something that members would want to consider. But I think we have to, when it comes to conditions, they have to be ones that are enforceable, that we're liable to enforce as a planning authority. The Environment Agency would deal with any matters that were relevant to them.
I think that probably is the answer I was expecting about it.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Yeah, I would like that as an informative note if we were to pass this application, Chairman, because it is a major concern of mine about that water table going into the future and it's not contaminated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Bolwell, thank you so much for your patience. You haven't forgotten your question, your comment, I hope.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Shane's questions have probably knocked a few of mine on the head as well, so thank you for that, Shane. I'd just like to say I find the planning assessment very detailed, and it is helpful in focusing on the relevant issues for decision making. But it's already been highlighted that in accordance with NPPF Para 177, the proposals for major developments in the AONB should be refused other than in exceptional circumstances. So it's extremely important that an assessment of the proposed development has been carried out previously against each of the three aspects of the NPPF major development test. And as I understand it, I believe that this site has previously been identified and included in the local plan. So to me, that removes an awful lot of the questions that we would normally be throwing out. And that's why I'm going to keep this fairly short. I do note the traffic would be generated by the proposal is a continuation of the same level of HGV movements, and that's already permitted under the existing permission, so I don't see an issue with that. I'm also mindful of the indication of the positive effects that this will have on the local economy, and that the ward member and parish council are also in favour of the application. It's very complex, but on balance, I'm minded to agree with the planning officer, and I would be tempted to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed in the report. And that is the proposal.
Thank you. I'm going to... Yes, I was going to hold that for a moment and go to other... So I've got a list of speakers here, actually, which I probably will go to before I ask for a seconder. Yeah, thank you. Can you turn your mic off, please? I've been reminded about, you're happy with if we go further, you're happy to have that informative note about control of the checking of the water supplies going forward.
Yes, Chair, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've got some more speakers, so I will hold that proposal just for the moment before I ask for a seconder. Kelvin Clayton, you were next, I think.
I'm not sure I've got much more to add to what Councillor Bulwell's just said. I think, if I'm honest, my gut feeling is to want to reject it because of the harm, but looking through the benefits, the need, I think on balance I would go along and support what Councillor Bulwell said.
Thank you. Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. I've sort of lost the paragraph that I can't... I had 10.71 and I've now lost... Perhaps it doesn't exist. Perhaps it was 10.171. When it comes to the terms of what this fund, the panel, may consider, it talks about recreational use of the area. I would say that could we... I think it's in conditions. I've sort of scrolled through and I've lost my place again. Could we include the safety and security of the residents as items which may, of the residents of the area, which may be considered for projects, not just a recreational activity? And I can't flip and find it now. So I would add that. My other point, while scrolling through, trying to find where I've highlighted again, is that I understand all the things about AONBs, but they are very much trying to preserve something that has happened over centuries. And the topography, the geography of the Isle of Purbeck has been formed by farming and by quarrying. There are voids which then make interesting wildlife areas. There are strip lynchets. You probably wouldn't be allowed to build those now. You know, this is a historic landscape, but quarrying is part of the historic landscape in the area. My only concern is that when we have a fund that we can spend to enhance something, we're enhancing, you know, footpaths and such like, fair enough, but we also need to enhance the safety and security of the residents, to which I would add in a cycle path, a safe cycle path from Kingston down to Corfe Castle, I would have said was a priority, even though highways say it's fine.
I think I take your point on that, but it's not included in what we've got here as part of it. And whether that fund could be utilised for that, I'm not sure. I'll have to take further advice on that. And Susie or Mike, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think that the principle of the fund is there to actually deal with what the specific impacts were that were identified through the assessment. So those landscape impacts, recreational use is part of the package, but because that's how often people interact with the landscape and perceive it as well. So things like footpaths and cycleways where there's an interaction, but not safety isn't something that's been flagged up as a concern or an issue. But anything that was done as far as any footpath or cycleway or recreational area would have to comply anyway with various criteria, whatever they might be, in relation to ensuring that they're safe and, you know, that the footpaths are free from obstruction, anything like that. I would be concerned about actually diluting the intent of the package of measures, because it's actually been very specifically worked up as a formula to deal with a very particular issue, and that funding is geared towards that. If you start then taking funds away from that amount to deal with other things that may not be directly relevant to the development, not only does it dilute the purposes for which you're collecting it, it also dilutes the benefit you can get in terms of dealing with the mitigation as well. So my intention or my advice would be that I think it's the way it's been worded would allow actually for us to make sure that anything that comes forward deals with things in a suitable way so that they're safe. But what we don't want to be doing is addressing issues that go beyond what were identified as impacts that the scheme had to deal with. Thank you.
Yes, I think we've covered that one, really. I want to move on because I've got other speakers, but thank you for raising it. It's an important point to consider when we're looking at what happens in the future. So thank you for raising that one. And I've got Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Rideout, Gillingham Ward. This site, as we've heard, is part of the BCP and Dorset Minerals Plan 2019. It also accords with the local plan. And I understand, yes, it is in a very sensitive area, Dorset AONB. But unfortunately, minerals sites are where they are in Dorset. And I've heard that it's only one or two sites in Dorset that supplies Dorset locally. So it's a sustainable operation as it is. This site's been worked since the 1940s. And I don't think there's been too much of a problem with it. And the company has a good track record and there's local support for the proposal. The impact on the AONB has been considered by the inspector at the local plan stage. So reading through the report, I can see that there is robust off-site environmental enhancements to offset the harm to the landscape and biodiversity mitigation through the habitats assessment. And we mustn't forget also the economic reasons, and the continued employment is important for the local area. So all in all, I've listened to everything. I feel that this application, I think it's robust enough. I think the environmental mitigation is robust enough. And as I say, it already accords with the local plan. So I'd be happy to propose to second approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you. Councillor Rideout has said everything I was just going to say, and I think that it's been a bit of a struggle here this morning, but we have in the event managed to have a pretty good look at this application, and I'm satisfied with the recommendation of the officer with the advisory note, and I think that I would be happy to support this. Thank you.
From that point now, I'm going to take it forward. We've had the proposal from Councillor Bolwell for the recommendation as detailed, which is quite detailed, as I said to you before, and I hope you've had a chance to look at it again with the various obligations listed, and if they're not carried out by the 21st of April next year or extended time as agreed, then that will be refused, basically. So I have a second. Councillor Rideout, you seconded it, I believe, did you not? Yes, you did. So, and there's the informative note to go on as well regarding the water follow-up. Yep, okay. So on that basis, I'm going to move to the vote now. So all those in favour of the recommendation to grant? That's unanimous. Well, thank you very much, members, and thank you, I think, for a very thorough debate, and thank the officers for their presentation and support they've given us on this one. It's quite a complicated one, and I think all the points that have been raised have been, some cases, a learning experience, but they've been very, very useful for everybody, I think, as well. So thank you for that. And on that note, at 11:49, I'm going to suggest we have a comfort break until midday. Thank you. One member down, I'm afraid. Councillor Dunseith, yes. Not lost her literally, she's left. No, she's left the meeting. We haven't lost her in the building or under the bench or anywhere. She's had to leave on other business. Councillor Rideout.
Just remind you, I have to leave 1 o'clock. That's okay.
Thank you for reminding me. I did indeed remember, but thank you again for flagging it up. Right, thank you. Okay. Agenda item 6 is planning application P/FUL/2022/02429, land at Galton Manor Farm, Dorset, DT2 8BZ. And that one is installation of ground-mounted photovoltaic solar farm and associated landscaping, hydrological and biodiversity enhancements. And the officer who's going to present that is Penny Canning. I've got Penny here. And when you're ready, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application relates to land at Galton Manor Farm, and it's for a solar park with various biodiversity and hydrological enhancements. The application would be over a 40-year period, and it would be a 30-megawatt solar farm. So the application site is highlighted here in red. It's situated in a rural location just to the east of Owermoyne and to the west of Winfrith Newborough. The red line that you can see running along down here is the access to the site, which runs to the A352, which is the Wareham Road from Dorchester to Wareham. The red line, didn't mean to draw along there. The red line running and transecting the landscape to the east is the route of the cable, which would be underground, and that would be about 1.83 kilometres. This plan just simply really shows you the site in its wider context. You've got Dorchester to the west here, and you've got Wool to the east, and you can see it in relation to the coastline. This is an aerial view that shows the application site, including its access down to the A352 and the cable route that runs along to the east. The application site forms 2 key fields. I think it's a little bit clearer on this next slide. This isn't an applicant drawing, so I've crudely drawn on the location here of the application site and the access down here. I think it's a little bit clearer in terms of showing its context. You've got the remainder of this field. You've got this large field here and a section to the north there. On this aerial, you can also see some existing solar parks within the area. You've got the land at Galton Manor Farm directly to the south. It's a 5-megawatt solar farm. And you've got 2 solar farms located at East Farm and Holly Farm to the west, both 5-megawatt solar farms. This application just shows that in a wider context. You've got in pink here that Holly Farm and East Farm and the existing solar farm at Galton Manor. You've got the proposed Galton Manor Farm in blue here. Also to the north, you've got an existing solar array at Crossways. And this plan also shows the extant permission for a 40-megawatt solar farm at North Fossil Farm, which you may be familiar with, having considered that at committee this time last year. This plan also shows some of the key footpaths, which I'll just highlight to you. We have a footpath that runs along in a north-south direction to the west of the application site, and that adjoins a footpath, a bridleway running east-west, which eventually adjoins to the Jubilee Way. You also have a footpath located to the south, a bridleway, I should say, which stretches in an east-west direction along an elevated ridge. The land in which the solar park is proposed forms a fairly flat plateau. So there are vantage points from that ridge line, and we will discuss that a bit further into the report. This plan just shows it in its wider context. Again, I won't dwell on this plan. It's quite a fussy plan, but it does just show this hashed area to the south forms the area of outstanding natural beauty. I've actually highlighted this on my aerial view just for clarity, so that land shaded in red here at the south forms the area of outstanding natural beauty. And I've just kept on this plan some of the key rights of way. You've got the footpath running to the west and connecting to that bridle way to the north. And you've got that bridle way running along that ridge line to the south, which falls within that area of outstanding natural beauty. In terms of the historic environment, I won't talk about this in too much detail because it's in my report, but I do make reference to this in my report, and I think it's useful to provide a bit of context for you. The stars located on this plan, it's very difficult to view on a large screen, I appreciate. They identify the listed buildings, largely grade 2 listed buildings. There's a grade 1 listed building located over here. And the small red circles, which are very hard to see, I appreciate, are barrows. The site is situated within a funerary landscape. The nearest barrow is Galton Heath Barrow, located to the west of the site in this location here. You have a further group of barrows located on Tadnall Heath Nature Reserve. A further group of barrows to the east, which I understand you may well have be familiar with if you went on the site visit last year. And you have a further group of barrows, the Ridge Barrow group, including the Five Marys, along that bridle way that runs in that east-west direction to the south of the site. In terms of some of the wildlife sites, again, I make reference to these in my report, so I just wanted to provide you with a plan to give you some context as to where those are located. Again, you've got the application site here, and the land in shaded in blue here forms the Dorset Heathlands, Dorset Heaths and Winfrith Heath. And the kind of western section of this is also a Dorset Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve, referred to as Tadnall Nature Reserve, which I refer to in my report. So the application is laid out or proposed to be laid out in line with the submitted plan. It would be provided within 5 parcels of land. I know it's really difficult to see in these large screens, so I've cut it in 2 and put it side by side, so it's enabled me to enlarge it slightly. So within the solar site would be some routes to allow maintenance. There's some small pink squares, very difficult to see on this plan. I'm just highlighting them here, which would be the inverter housing. And there would also be a small substation located along the eastern boundary here. You will see there's also landscaping proposed, and I will come on to a landscape strategy in a moment where we will see that in a bit more detail. So the solar panels would be provided between 0.8 and 3.5 metres above the ground, and they'd be angled between 20 and 25 degrees due south. This plan just shows some of the deer fencing proposed. It would be 2.4 metres in height, and there would be gaps within the fencing going around, which would accommodate any badgers. This is just a detail of the CCTV that would be provided. The inverter housing and the substation. There's a condition on the proposed on the application report that relates to obtaining a material schedule where we'll be able to control things like colour and so forth and finish. So this is the landscape strategy. Again, it's useful to see it in its true form, but I have broken it down just to provide a bit further detail and hopefully make it a bit easier for you to see. in and around the site is proposed landscaping, where there's potential for vantage points from nearby footpath. There's additional planting proposed, and the panels are brought back away from that boundary. The only other thing to particularly note on this plan to draw your attention to is in this northern parcel of land is a proposed wetland area, which is just shown in a little bit more detail there. And again, my report details some of the implications of that wetland area, but I won't go into detail here. So I've attempted to provide you with some viewpoints, mainly from public rights of way. This plan down to the south just shows you approximately where I am when I'm looking towards the site. You can see it's fairly level area. There are fluctuations in the levels, but it's relatively flat overall. And I'm actually looking towards that existing bit of solar farm, but it's very difficult to see from this location. This is just walking further north onto that farm, along that path, sorry. Between where the footpath where I'm stood and the application site is actually an intervening field. So where there are gaps through, there's actually a further hedgerow. You can just about see some of the panels, I think, in that area where I'm pointing. Again, this is further up on the footpath. The gap there is showing the intervening field, this one here. It would, due to the hedgerows, there may be glimpses, but it would be very limited views towards the site. So I've gone into the most northern field, so the solar farm is to the east. Again, you wouldn't see much here. And in my report, you will see, and previously in my presentation, I referred to the barrow that's most close to the application site. You can actually see this in this view. Stood on top of the barrow, you get a much better vantage point because I'm obviously elevated. And you can see here in the distance, very difficult to see in this photo, but you can just get some glimpsed views of the existing solar arrays. They would continue along here. That's that intervening field that we were looking across earlier. And it would continue across here. When you look at the landscape strategy, this is where the panels were actually pulled back slightly from the boundary and additional landscaping provided. That's probably one of the most clear vantage points towards the site that you will see, which is actually looking across in that gap there in that photo. You then get this band of trees, which then provides additional screening moving further up. I've sought to provide some viewpoints from the bridleway to the north. It's really difficult to see much from this point. You can see that the land is slightly elevated. The brow of the hill actually provides quite good screening, but it was quite a useful shot. So in order to show you the lie of the land, that plateau and that ridge line to the south that I'm looking at, which we will consider as I go through the presentation. Again, these are some shots from the north. You can see here the low-lying level and the high water table has resulted in this marshy setup, and we are leading here towards the proposed wetland creation. So I'm stood about here. The wetland creation would be formed within this area here, which I'm looking out towards. These are some views along, simply within gateways, along the road running through Tadnall to the east of the application site. Very difficult to see very much from that location. Perhaps you can see a little more from this gateway. The field where the solar panels will be proposed is that next field along the other side of that hedgerow. Again, there are additional planting proposed as part of their landscape strategy. So I'll just bring you back to this plan to remind you where we've been. So we've walked and considered viewpoints along this footpath here and to the north, and we've looked through gateways along Tadnall. Now, one of the key issues that you will have seen and read about will be the impact on views from the area of outstanding natural beauty. So I will next take you along this route here. And for this, I will rely on the agent's submitted photo montages because I think these are really useful in providing and identifying where that solar farm is within the wider landscape. The viewpoints to be provided are an artist's impression. They're based on growth rates. Concern has been raised by the AUMB team that the photo montages offer an overly optimistic impression of growth rates, and therefore it's important that the following images are viewed with that understanding and in that context. They are simply an artist impression, so they cannot be relied on with any certainty, but they are certainly useful in our understanding of the likely impacts. So the applicant has provided for us to consider both winter and summer viewpoints. They have also superimposed the photo montages for North Fossil Farm as well. It's very difficult on these screens to see them, but I will just highlight here. This is the application site. You can just see an area there of panels. This would be from viewpoint 3. If I just run back to that plan, that's to the west of this bridleway. We'll then go to viewpoint 4. We'll then go to viewpoint 6 here. So we start off at the west. And this area here, to the right of that image, is the impression of North Fossil Farm, which I should just remind is an extant permission. It's not actually in place yet. So that was year 1. This is year 10. I'll just highlight again where we're looking. This is the application site around my cursor. And this is year 20. I now move to the summer. You've got year 1, year 10, and year 20. Viewpoint 4, again, this starts out on the winter. You can see it's a little bit more clear now as we walk a bit further east along that bridleway. And you've got the North Fossil Farm here. I'll leave my cursor there. That's year 10. You can just see it there. And year 20, you can see approximately there. This is the same vantage point, but during the summer. So year 1, year 10, and year 20. We now move to viewpoint 6. This is the application proposal here. North Fossil Farm to the east of this image. This is the winter, year 1, year 10, year 20. And the same viewpoint from the summer. You can see the panels here. Year 10, year 20. So on this slide, I've attempted to set what I consider to be the main planning issues. I won't go through all of them in detail because this is done for you in the report, but I will highlight what I think are the key issues that I want to draw your attention to. In terms of the principle of development, it's a 30 megawatt facility that we're looking at over a 40-year period, providing enough electricity to serve 10,388 homes and contributing to a significant carbon saving. In terms of the impact on the area of outstanding natural beauty, this is one of the key issues that I draw on my report. Having particular regard, really, to those viewpoints that we've just considered from the photo montages, from that ridge line to the south, where you have vantage points over that plateau where the proposal would be provided. It would affect a stretch of approximately 3.6 kilometres of that bridleway, where there would be harm to the special qualities, both from the individual and the cumulative impact. That harm, in particular, relying on considering one of those special qualities that the area is designated for, being its undeveloped rural nature. And in particular, the viewpoints in and out of the area of outstanding natural beauty is also key. So in order to reduce the impacts, the applicant has submitted a landscape strategy that we have seen that includes quite a bit of planting in and around the site. And they have also agreed to a compensatory package. That has been calculated on a very similar basis to the compensatory package that was agreed for North Fossil Farm. There has been an uplift on that figure in terms of inflation, and it has been proposed that that be paid over a 40-year period. Now, that differs to the North Fossil Farm approach, which secured that compensation for 20 years. That 40-year period is a reflection that the harm is greater in this case than what was considered for North Fossil Farm. So the mitigation and compensatory package goes some way to addressing and moderating some of that harm. But the AUMB team do consider that that harm is not outweighed. They consider the compensatory package to be calculated on a reasonable basis. They consider the landscape strategy to be sufficient in the sense that not much more could be done, but because of those elevated vantage points, it would be impossible to fully screen, and therefore the AUMB team do continue to object in respect of the application. In terms of heritage, the site falls within the setting of numerous scheduled ancient monuments that we have looked at, and the Design and Conservation Officer has identified less than substantial harm in respect of this. So in order to try and moderate that impact in line with paragraph 202 of the NPPF, the applicant has agreed to provide information boards and provide further archaeological investigation, which the Conservation Officer considers would be a substantial public benefit to understanding the historic significance of this funerary landscape. And as such, that harm is considered to be outweighed. The other key main issue I'd just like to address is the biodiversity benefits. In that respect, the application provides habitat enhancement. It also provides habitat creation in the form of that wetlands area provided to the north. It would also enable the restoration of the natural hydrological processes of Tadnall Reserve, and by doing so, reduce the nutrient content within the river network. It's considered that the biodiversity benefits presented with this application go beyond what would normally be required, such that significant weight can be attributed to these benefits. The proposed development is considered to be acceptable in terms of the highway safety and residential amenity, and it's noteworthy that the proposal has received public support. So whilst recognising the harm to the AUMB, which significant weight should be applied in the decision-making process, the mitigation compensatory measures do go some way to lessening that harm. Its position outside of the area of outstanding natural beauty and separated from North Fossil Farm by the rural open space between the two sites also assists in reducing that impact. So although the benefits may not on their own be sufficient to outweigh the harm identified, together the benefits to both green energy targets and biodiversity are significant. The heritage benefits are also considered to outweigh any harm. And cumulatively, it's considered that the harm to the area of outstanding natural beauty is in this case outweighed by the public benefits of the proposal, which has led to a recommendation to approve, subject to conditions, and a legal agreement to secure the Landscape Enhancement Fund. If within 6 months a legal agreement is not secured, then the application would be refused for the reasons set out in the report and slide. There's just one update that I'd like to report, and that's an amendment to Condition 6, which is on page 161. Fairly minor update, just simply wanting to make reference to a drawing number that identifies the Drain 1, which is referred to in that condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Penny. Thank you. Very good report, I think, on that. I've got two speakers on this one, and the ward member, Councillor Nick Ireland, and I think Nick wants to speak on this. Is that right? Yeah, he'll come in at the end. So my first speaker is Fiona Bowles. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Is that clear? Thank you very much. I'm a resident of Winfrith Newborough and I own land in the parish as well. But I've been an environmental professional with the water industry all my life, and I've worked with the Dorset Council, Dorset Catchment Partnerships, and I'm a member of the Local Nature Partnership in Dorset. So I really support the provision of green power, and my land indeed is next to the fossil farm development. But what I particularly like about this development is that it combines the multiple benefits of green power, which we need, with sustainable food and the biodiversity gain. And this is particularly important where we know agriculture is having a big impact on the River Frome and the Poole Harbour and giving rise to nutrient neutrality as well as the population. So I really appreciate the biodiversity input on the scheme, much of which is traditionally typical pasture and hedgerow, but the wetland proposal is particularly pertinent here, where we know from Natural England we need 250 hectares of wetland in the Frome area, and so this is a great contribution, and it will support specialist wetland species, and the thought of stork is particularly important, exciting to me. I'm also in the local access forum. I use those bridleways and footpaths along the Chalk Ridge regularly, and just as a personal point of view, one more man-made structure in the landscape will not worry me, but the thought of seeing a stork flying over will very much enhance my day out, I think. And I think it'd be a great way of engaging locals in the environment even more. However, I do appreciate the potential for improving the access across the A352, which rather severs a lot of the public rights of way there. So in the fund, if that's possible, that would be good. So I think to summarise, I think this particular application with its multiple benefits is where they are sensitively sort of designed around the needs of the climate change and nature emergency we've got at the moment. I think they'll really contribute to the Dorset catchment strategy and the local nature recovery strategy. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today, Chairman.
Thank you. And my next speaker is Hugo House, who's the Development Director from the applicant. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. Following thorough pre-application engagement, our clean energy proposal at Manor Farm has received significant community support and a recommendation that permission be granted. We have worked closely with officers, evolving the project to ensure the scheme delivers meaningful, sustainable development. I'll highlight some of the benefits of our proposal. Our vision for Manor Farm Solar is to create a pioneering project that delivers renewable energy, significant ecological benefits, and the continuation of agriculture. The water and wildlife improvements the proposal delivers will complement the landowner's ongoing work of rewilding large areas of his farm. The creation of the new wetland will support plans for the reintroduction of white storks and deliver downstream benefits to the adjacent Winfrith Heath and Tadnell nature reserves. Winfrith receives some of the highest levels of sunshine in the UK. This maximises the site's potential to produce clean electricity. As the neighbouring Winfrith nuclear facility is decommissioned, this presents a rare opportunity to plug in new generation and make an economically viable connection to the electricity grid. If approved, the development will make a substantial contribution to the county and country requirements for renewable energy. The 30 megawatt design will generate electricity sufficient to power over 10,300 homes and save over 6,200 tonnes of carbon emissions each year. The solar farm is designed to ensure sheep can graze. Intensive agriculture and chemical inputs can be avoided, so soil condition can be restored. The project is fully reversible, and after 40 years, the land will be revitalised, ready for harvest, and benefit from an improved and resilient ecosystem. The COP27 climate conference is concluding against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine that has provoked an energy crisis and cost of living crisis. Our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, addressed the conference, stating, "The conflict and soaring energy prices are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster, and that climate security goes hand in hand with with energy security. And he concluded, investing in renewables is precisely the way to ensure ourselves against the risk of energy dependency. Dorset Council has declared a climate and ecological emergency and announced their goals to become carbon neutral by 2040. Projects such as Manor Farm Solar are critical to achieving net zero for Dorset and the UK. We have worked diligently with officers to ensure our proposal is robust and delivers meaningful environmental benefits. We therefore respectfully request that permission is granted in accordance with officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least is Councillor Nick Ireland. Nick, you've got 3 minutes.
I'm so sorry.
There you go. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Nick Ireland, I represent Crossways Ward. It was a bit to my surprise when I read the officer's report that apparently I'm not the ward councillor, but I definitely certainly am. The boundary of the site is actually on the east of my ward. It is actually the boundary. Only the cable run is in Councillor Miller and Wharf's ward. So I'm here to represent the Owen Moyne mostly and Crossways. So I did actually wonder whether I should bother turning up, given the recommendation is for approval, but I did watch your previous meeting last month, and given that you refused the solar farm, I thought I'd better not chance it. So here I am. So to get to the point, Crossways do not object, and Owen Moyne actually support as parish councils. They're very supportive of this, and the applicant, Hugo in front of me, has been to their council and given them briefings as well, and also to me. Given that 40% of Dorset is mostly AO and B, and most of it is in Dorset Council's patch, and that solar farms aren't urban structures, it's probably very difficult to find somewhere that you can put them in our area where you can't actually see them. And some person or some organisation will guarantee to object, but in the scheme of things, solar farms are just ephemeral blips on the landscape. To take Councillor Brenton's point before, the strip lynchets, quarries all over Purbeck, solar farms that are essentially temporary, they don't damage the land, and once they're taken away, you won't notice they were there. And global heating is it's a dire possibility, and it's no longer a dire possibility. In fact, it's actually a present reality. And reducing it is no longer a question of looking after the planet, but actually preserving human civilization, in my view. And we need to decarbonise, and to do that, we need clean electricity, and we need lots of it. And a fully electrified global economy requires only 50% of the current energy demand we have right now. And to put it bluntly, if you doubled every year from now on the production of EVs, solar farms and wind farms, you'd actually have a decarbonised, clean, zero energy by 2030, but we just haven't the will to do that. However, by approving this today, we here in Dorset can do our bit to support that and make a difference, and it will make a difference. So I hope you approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything you officers want to respond to what you've heard?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Right, we'll go on to members' questions. And most of you in the room here were familiar with that area because we did the site visit when we looked at the North Fossil Farm. I think it's about this time last year, if I remember rightly. And so you're familiar. We went up on the AOMB and looked down over, as well as going nearer the site. So you are, I think, very familiar with that, picking up on the point about site visit that was made on the previous application. So if anybody's got any questions, once again, I'll go through you as I see you there. So firstly, Councillor Brenton.
This grid connectivity, 13.1. Could I have a bit more explanation, please?
Regional connectivity, yes.
Thank you, Chair. So as part of the application submitted, part of the, amongst other things, of course, but part of the argument for the location of this solar farm was that there was access to the energy grid. Now, without going into too much detail, due to various different levels and complexities with the grid network, it's not always easy to find a connection to that grid. So one of the applicants' cases, one of their sort of arguments is that actually this is a really critical location. We have agreement to connect to the grid. There aren't many other places they can easily find connectivity, and that they felt that that should be something that should be taken into consideration. Now, I go through in my report in terms of the weight that we can give that. I think connectivity to the grid can be a consideration, a material consideration, perhaps not one that we can give significant weight. There are other connections available, but not necessarily at the cost that the developers would want to pay. They then need to factor that into the viability of their schemes. Now, viability isn't a matter that we would generally give weight to when considering solar farms. So it's not something we've given significant weight to in this case, but it is a material planning consideration, connectivity to the grid, of course. This connection, this solar farm would connect into the substation that was approved as part of the North Fossil Farm. So there is certainly ease of connection in this location. I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I think that was a very thorough answer, actually, Councillor Brenton, and it is ease of connection, basically, which is the overriding factor, I think, in this case. So, Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. I have no technical questions and would be prepared to propose acceptance of the officer's report at the due time.
Right, well, I'll put a hold on that if I'm keep it on the table. Thank you. Could you turn your mic off, please? Councillor Dyer.
No questions, Chairman, and I've heard nothing to dislike.
Councillor Bolwell.
No questions, Chairman, apart from the fact I've just been reading the recommendation and it just says delegate authority to grant to the head of planning or service manager. It doesn't actually say to approve the application. Maybe by implication it's there, but it doesn't actually make that statement, which it normally does. Just querying that. Thank you.
I'll put a bit of meat on that perhaps as we go through, because I raised that query actually at an earlier stage. So I will clarify before we go into any final decisions on this decision-making. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And on that basis, I'd like to second the motion from Councillor Clayton in due course.
Okay, well, again, I'll hold that if you don't mind, because I think I'd like to hear from other members. Councillor Rideout, any questions from you?
Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two questions. It talks, I thought I'd made a note of it. I think it was 16 transformers over 8 sites within the application. By the way, excellent report, by the way, and I think one of the best presentations I've ever sat through, I think. So congratulations to the officers involved. But I think I think it was 16 transformers over 8 sites. I just wondered just how, it said in meterage how much they were, and I'm sure I made a note of it, and I can't find it now. I think they were 3 metres high. It's a substation. 6 by 3.6 by 3 metres in building, and the transformers at 8 locations are 5 metres by 2 metres, 2.5 metres by 3 metres. Whether they're going to be screened or not in any way, I didn't see it in the report. Is my first question. I've got another one to come back as well. Chairman, thank you.
Yes. Right, Penny, anything on that screening issue?
Thank you, Chairman. No screening specifically is proposed in relation to the inverter housing, but they would form, let me just take you to the site plan. So they would be integrated within the wider site, adjacent to the solar panels. So, for example, where my cursor is here, here, here. So they would be within the wider screening provided through the mitigation strategy. So we've got planting in and around the site, and that would contribute to some of the screening. No further additional screening is proposed, though. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, okay, well, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, in the overall picture, they will be screened by the general landscaping.
Chairman, in terms of it being such a rural location then, but I know there's going to be some CCTV footage on site, is there any view to putting vandal-proof fencing around them so we don't have a situation with damage that's being done to them? We've had this on sites before, and we've requested it before as to whether there's going to be fencing around that type of infrastructure, because we don't want children actually getting in amongst the transformers and such like.
This is fencing around the inverters that you're asking for, yes.
The transformer and the substation as well, Chairman. Thank you.
I'm not sure. How have we fixed on that?
Yeah, I mean, security is always a challenge for these solar farm sites. There is deer fencing. I'm not quite sure if the CCTV is inside or outside of that fencing, but the CCTV is there to try and identify, breaches in that security. There is a condition on the application that seeks a plan to show where all those cameras will be precisely located and ensure that they're looking inwards towards the application site. But beyond that, I'm probably not able to add any further, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm not sure that's something we can put in condition-wise. It might be for a note, but not conditionally, because, I mean, that would have to make a totally new application, I would have thought, actually, would it not? Yeah, bear in mind the site has got security fencing, the site as a whole, so...
Chairman, I appreciate that, but I think it's only deer fencing that surrounds the site. So I would like an informative note to the applicant to actually put secure fencing around those transformers and that small substation building as well. We've had this come up in 4 applications before. The last thing we want is children don't mix well with electricity. So I'd like that as an informative note, please, if the proposer and the seconder are willing to accept that. Can I move on to my next question?
I'm just going to go to the... I've got an officer indicating. I'm just going to check with the officer first before I go back to the proposer. Yes, Anne.
Chair, I was just going to highlight, as Penn has shown in the presentation, that essentially the site isn't very close to any significant amount of dwellings. So the likelihood of sort of children or young children who could be at danger of doing something they don't quite realise the consequences of, wandering into or around the site would be slim. If there's deer fencing, somebody would have to intentionally take their wire cutters out and break through in order to get in. And also, if you think about informative, that's not actually enforceable. It wouldn't actually require the applicant to do it.
The proposer happy to have that as an informative note?
Yes, Chair, but I also accept the officer's point of intentional breaking in seems very unlikely.
Okay, thank you. Shane, is that it now? Can I move on?
One more, Chairman. It's to do with, it's not so much as the connectivity, but the capacity. It says on page 136 of 15.3.35, Winthrift Heath bulk supply point, will this cope without an upgrade by SSEN, the power provider? It's not so much the connectivity. I know that connectivity on these types of sites, they need to be close to connectivity points, otherwise they're not viable financially if the applicant has to put that cabling in. So it's in terms of this site's come forward because there's an easy access to actually connect to the grid. But will the grid at this point actually cope with it? It's already got 2 solar farms plus another solar farm that's close to it and the fossil farm proposed one as well. So my question is the capacity of the grid in this area able to cope with it? I've had officers tell me that in terms of the grid provision across Dorset, capacity is extremely constrained. So it's this localised area. Thank you.
I think I might know what the answer is, but I'm going to defer to the officer.
Thank you, Chairman. It's understood that there is capacity at this point, but I think we just need to be careful also that we're considering the development before us in terms of the what it might cost the developer or so forth to connect to that grid is going slightly outside of what we're considering before us. But it is understood that there is capacity. I hope that helps.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to have to hurry you, though, because I've got other people to come in.
It wasn't the cost of connectivity, it was the capacity. Is the capacity able to be cope in this area?
Is there anything you can add to that?
It's understood that there is capacity. Yeah, that's part of the kind of developers' justification for this location is that they have a connection. There is capacity to support the development. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I would expect that to be organised in advance, that there is sufficient. But I accept what you say because this has been flagged up on previous occasions. So thank you. Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, can I say, terrific report. Thank you very much indeed, and terrific presentation. It does make our lives so much easier when we get a presentation that's this good. So thank you for that. I think this is a really, really good scheme. There's lots to like very much about it. You know, it's really well thought out and as I say, lots to like about it. But I do just feel I need to ask the question that's my only reservation, and that's about the cumulative impact. We've got 6 solar farms. This will be the 6th solar farm in this plateau, and it's quite an important funerary landscape here, as the viewpoints that you showed us there did actually demonstrate. Now, there is a landscaping plan, but that's not going to, and I don't think we would expect a landscaping plan to hide solar farms because they don't need hiding. They're perfectly acceptable in the landscape. Can I just ask that officers, if you could have some comment, because I'm aware that the AONB team do have reservations, but give me some comfort, if you will, about the cumulative impact of these 6 solar farms in close proximity to each other in this important landscape. And why is that acceptable?
Yes, fair comment.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the visual impact, the key cumulative impact relates to the Galton Manor Farm application that we're looking at the moment, and the consented application at North Fossil Farm. East Farm and Holly Farm can be seen along that bridleway, but not so much in context with this application. So that's the key thing that you're considering, is those two. They are the 2 most significant proposals that will be seen alongside. And there is likely to be some cumulative, there is some harm identified. The AONB team comments are supported in terms of the fact that there is likely to be both individual harm and cumulative harm. And that's one of the things that we're, suppose, presenting to you to consider as part of that recommendation. Now, the gap afforded between those solar sites, I think, is important in terms of assisting in moderating and reducing that cumulative impact. But they will be seen within the same vantage points, and that's something that we have to weigh into the decision-making process. And without repeating myself, obviously, we've tried to weigh that up within that report, balance that against some of those other public benefits. And in this case, we're not saying that there won't be harm. What we're saying is that the public benefits associated with that application outweigh that harm. I hope that helps. Thanks.
Yeah, the appearance of those, if you recall, you were on that site visit, the appearance of those existing ones there, they were rather like bodies of water anyway, from that viewpoint up, which is really the key issue here, from the viewpoint up on the AONB. They were certainly like bodies of water. So that would just be, in this case, if it were granted, it would be an extension of that effect.
That's quite right, and I'm happy with that. I just wanted to bring it out, as it were, a bit. But no, I think you're right. It's well addressed in the report. Thank you.
And Vice Chairman, anything from you?
No, thank you, Chairman. No, I agree that it's probably a good location in regard to the topography of the whole site. As you've said, you won't see it anything other than a body of water when you look down, as we've seen before. So I'm quite happy with this application.
Sorry, Chair, can I just...
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, and it is something that it's just to make the point that each site will have to be taken on its merits, having regards to those cumulative issues. So things can change over time as you get more solar farms coming forward, particularly in an area that might have further bearing. But that's obviously been taken into account in this particular case in the officer's report. But it does highlight the importance of each site being considered very much on its merits and what the impacts are and what those things are. So it's not a fixed thing. Cumulative impacts, obviously, by their nature, mean that you will get more impact if more comes along, and the gaps between them can be very important. And that's why quite a lot of care has been taken in the report in considering that issue. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Well, as so often happens at these meetings, questions seem to have merged with debate anyway, and we had an early on proposal and seconder. Is there any member that's got anything pressingly different to what they've heard already that they want to say, or are you happy if I move to the vote, having just confirmed, I will confirm the recommendation again? Yes, Kelvin.
Yeah, if we could just clarify, is my too hastily reading of the recommendation? It doesn't actually say, as Councillor Bulwer said, to grant permission. It simply said to grant head of planning to secure the following. So perhaps we could have some clarification. It is to grant permission.
If I may, I did query this at the beginning. Mike, by the way, turn your mic off. And it's the recommendations in two parts, A and B, and we approve it as one block, or not, as the case may be. But in this case, we're granting it subject to conditions and the completion of the satisfactory planning obligation to secure the following. And then the following is listed. And then if that is not agreed, within 6 months from the date of this committee, or such extended time as agreed by the head of planning or service manager for development management and enforcement, then a refusal comes into play. So does that clarify it for you?
I'm not sure it does actually, Chair. The grant applies to secure the following. I don't see anywhere in their wording that says to grant permission.
I'll ask legal to give you a proper firm take on that.
Thank you, Chair. I think the recommendation, to put it clearly, should have been to grant planning permission. I can see why it's confused members, but it could also be read in shorthand that it's delegates authority to grant subject to conditions. So the delegation is being given to the head of planning, and it's a delegation to grant. Otherwise, the opposite would be a delegation to refuse, or an actual refusal. But if it helps members, the recommendation, you could insert the words to grant planning permission, and I think that would reflect accurately the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Happy with that, Kelvin? Together with the informative note about the fencing that Councillor Bartlett mentioned, yes? And Councillor Bolwell, the seconder, you happy? Right, I've got to put it to the vote. So those in favour of the... Yes.
Sorry, can I just remind you of the update of condition 6 as well, that's granted subject to that update. Many thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did have it on my notes here to flag up, but thank you. Yes, there's also the slight amendment to condition 6, which is just insertion of a drawing reference. You happy with that? Okay, on that note, all those in favour of the recommendations A and B combined, that's unanimous? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Thank you for that debate too. Very thorough. Thanks again for a very good presentation, Penny. And before I move on, we're just moving up to near enough 1 o'clock. Can I just have members' agreement that we carry on the rest of the meeting and not have a break now, because we're going on to agenda item 7. Are members in agreement we continue? All agreed? Thank you. Thanks very much. So item 7 is urgent items. There are none. And item 8, exempt business. There is none. And item 9 is an appeal report for information only. So on that note, members, I'm going to close the meeting, or I got in before 1 o'clock actually, 12:55. And thank you all very, very much for a very thorough, what I call quizzing, if you like, and interrogation of what we've had before us this morning. And thank you for our other contributors too, for helping us. And very briefly before we go, once we're out of the meeting, I'd like to have a word with members away from the meeting itself, please.